Hello. Now, this is a weirder stream. I've never done any stream like this, and I thought I might as well, because it's sharing something I grew to have a passion about, even though my later work has some darker, very dark feelings about being overworked, but we're gonna... Oh, words. Something I am passionate about and know a lot about, I've decided to do a stream which just goes through me writing a poem. I've mentioned... Oh, hang on. The problem is my model is blending in with the white of the page, so let me see if I can change that, even if it's gonna look worse. View, wouldn't it be? Nope. Actually, does full screen fix? No, full screen does not fix an issue. Dismiss. I don't want full screen. Let me go back. No! God damn it, let me go back. Whatever. Refresh. Damn, didn't even put anything new on. Not that. Good going, me. Good start. Good start. Press. Okay, cool. Yeah, whatever. Dismiss. Anyway, good start. So, as you can see, it's called Let's Write Poetry because I want to write some poetry. I haven't done it in a while. I think the last poem I wrote was when I was playing Unhollowed Metropolis, which is a tabletop game, and I was playing it with a friend, and I decided to make my character poetry obsessed for their flaw, and so I wrote poems for them from their point of view, which is an interesting exercise. It's not something I usually do, is write a poem from someone else's point of view. Well, sort of. It's difficult to explain, but I write poetry. I've written poetry. My bachelor's degree is in poetry. I am a professional writer, not a poet. I was a professional video game writer, so I can actually call myself a professional writer, which is a dream come true. Actually, I don't have to put aspiring writer anymore, but. No, I did well for a video game company writing, so I actually have the credentials, but I don't think confidential well, not confidentials certificates and stuff should bar anyone from art, especially writing. Writing is a weird art. It's not. I don't think obviously it's not as visually impressive as visual art like digital, but I do have respect for all my digital art style there. But writing is very interesting in my opinion. Then again, I got a degree in it, so it's me. It's me. So I'm gonna go through writing a poem. I've got some ideas, some basic ideas for it. I was actually redoing one of the first poems I ever wrote for my degree, and but with more of a spin that I think is at least more interesting for what it is. I don't have that poem. I should have probably got it onto my actual VTubing account, a Google account, to show you what it was, which I can do, but it would be a little bit of a pain, and actually no, I think I will do that. Give me a sec. It's not gonna come up, but I'm worried about sound. Sound. So I'm gonna mute desktop audio because I have YouTube links up with this, so let me do this. Okay, cool. I hope nothing bad came up on my thing. I mean, to be fair, I can... Desktop audio is muted, so I can just check the stream myself. Oh yeah, I forgot you can't go back in the stream. Never mind, that sucks. Okay, cool. Anyway. Let me go get this. Let me go get one of the first poems I wrote for university, and I'm gonna redo it roughly. Is this semester one? Or was it semester 2? Can I just not find it? Or did I move it here? Oh, I moved it here. Okay, cool. Let me get this up. Yeah, okay, cool. You're seeing me mess around. But I do specifically want this. Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to download it first. Good going me. I'm very pre-planned all of this. But once... Okay, cool. I don't need Firefox anymore, and it can go... Die. There, cool. Let me put this up. Hopefully my real name's not attached to this. I should have checked that, but... Actually, I can check that fairly easily. We're just going to open and... Yeah, my real name's not attached to this. Cool. Just for a check. So, this was one of the first poems I ever wrote when I got more into poetry. Okay, when I was doing it every single week. We'll go across some more things about poetry and some stuff I've learned about it. But generally, I want to start with this because I'm going to be honest, first time you pick up poetry, your poems are going to suck, and this one does. And I kind of want to go with it. So it's Skahak. Now, this one is edited, but it's in a style which I can't remember, because for our degree, we had to do a already pre-planned format structure. I know words, I remember words. Proper poetry word structure, which is like haikus and sonnets and stuff. I forget what one I did for this, but I remember it was rhyme this okay, so it was like A B C. It was like A B D A B A then A B A and A B, I think. So it was named Skahak. What do you want to name the other one? Skahak. I have blood on my hands. My heart is torn by ancient thorns. My students slipped away like sand. They came bloody from another land, bouncing and bright, Cuchulainn sang of he adores Ferdinand. His foster brother carried their weapons in his hands. Cuchulainn fought like a Fomorian warband. Ferdinand trained in bitter rain, trained harder to become a master of arms. They never listened, they always slipped away like sand. Cuchulainn had wild light, bringing his father's laughter to the shadowy land. Clearly my daughter thought so, as she adored him, having him always in her hand. Ferdinand was an ancient standing stone, withstanding even every punish, cut, broken bone and bruise. He still lowered his sword to point at the sand. But his friendship could not withstand. When brothers met with sword, but the people of Ulster had a problem on their hand. Cuchulainn was not a man, fighting with raspy breath as Queen Meb's army swarmed. His human form slipped away like sand. Letting go, he crushed people like grapes in his hands, skin burning and muscles spasming, his rage a storm. Cuchulainn held death in his hands. Ferdinand calmed his brother, where they both stand. On opposite sides of war, sword against sword, they slipped away like sand. They suffocating tears burned my cheek. Suffocated tears burned my cheeks, each lost in those ancient bony thorns. I gripped the barbs of gay bulb with my hands. My students slip away like sand. Still remember the structure now, but this isn't good. Mainly because I'm working in a structure that I can't rhyme very well, and if I remember, you had to repeat sand and hands for this thing, for the ending line of that one. But we're gonna start with basically some poetry advice, because I thought I'd read out one of my very earlier poems, and now I'm gonna give some poetry advice. The big thing is I'm going to say, warning, I have dyslexia. Which I think is spelled wrong, because of course it is, because whoever decided to spell out a word sucks. And I just noticed that it's really hard to see on this thing on my stream, so I'm gonna probably up things to 15. That probably makes it easier. I have dyslexia. Means I'm gonna spell stuff wrong, and it's kind of an issue, but it's a thing that I think I should say. If we're doing a writing thing, I should point out that hey, I have this issue with writing, with spelling, and this does affect how I write poetry and how it works for me. And by the way, this is very off the cuff. I've just decided to do this, and we'll probably stop the stream after I've done one poem. But God knows how long that's gonna take, because they take a while. Firstly, poetry is difficult. It's a very difficult writing style because of how little words you usually have. Now, poetry of how I come up my poetry flow. Let me do that. Tends to starts with idea, which is the core of what I'm going to be basing the poem around, and this is usually based in an emotion, a metaphor, or a myth. Now, a couple of those are myths. I'm going to highlight as specifically is my style. I love writing about myths and stories. I am if making my character Gawain, my VTuber title Gawain Le Fey, referencing King Arthur's myths and stuff isn't a dead giveaway of my love of such media. It just is. I love myths. Almost all my poems have a connection to mythology, or I put in a connection to mythology as a metaphor, and that's where the strong ties come in to this. If you want to write with a lot of references to myths and stuff, use it as a metaphor or an exploration, because that's tend to how I do it. And that tends to be what I do. This is why I think this is poor, because I did not get across what I wanted to get across. I wanted to explore emotions, but I just retold the story of Cuchulainn from Skyhawk's point of view, which is fine, but I don't think it's as strong as it could be. And sometimes I come from an emotion. I want to explore emotion, whether it's depression, anxiety, and other things. Sometimes it can just be the fact that I like magical girls, which is a strange, not exactly strange. I don't want to shame anyone on that one, but I do like magical girls. So I've done a whole poem about exploring my mixed feelings on that, because it is children's media that I do watch and consume as when I'm older. I've written a couple poems on that one into that thing, and a metaphor. Whether a gripping metaphor, whether it's linked to myth, or just a metaphor entirely, I sometimes just explore a metaphor through the poem, and that tends to be the idea. Now, this is where more experienced and probably better poets would start being like, choose something for like more fitting, more thing. And I do mess around with structure. I have messed around with structure before, but I don't tend to, and I don't tend to mess with structures. Because of a couple reasons. I am really bad at meter and rhyming. And this causes a lot of the best things in poems to be hard for me, so to speak, because I'm really bad at it. I could get better with practice, but I found my own flow in writing. I don't tend to mess with structure unless I have a really strong idea for what I want to do with a structure. But tends to be, I either whoops, did not mean to go full screen there, which actually might make, okay, cool. There, that's better. Obviously, if I want to go off this page, I'll have to exit full screen, and I forgot which button did that, but we're here now, so it's fine. I don't mess with structure a lot. I'm really bad at meter and rhyme. Meter is the sound of the word, like bad. God damn it, Google Docs. Bad at meter and rhyme. This is mainly because of my dyslexia. I'm pretty sure I've narrowed it down to just hearing the beats of the words kind of messes with me. I'm not very good at that, but so I don't mess with it. Rhyming is also I find it really hard to hear rhymes, especially half rhymes. Which, if you do want to rhyme, this is just a general tip. use half rhymes. Now, half rhyming isn't necessary, but it does keep your poems from sounding like nursery rhymes, and it's important. And if you're going for nursery rhymes, that's fine. It's just a technique use. You have to be aware. Full rhymes are harder to make sound non in that like nursery rhyme technique than half rhymes, and half rhyming is hard. Again, for me specifically, so I don't tend to stay with it. What structure I do tend to use is 15 lines, 5 lines per stanza is what I tend to use. Though I have often what I use. This is getting a mess, but whatever. This is what I use. I use 15 lines, 5 lines per stanza. This mainly comes from my university experience because I know the minimum. I know when I started writing in this structure. Again, this structure, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a name, an official name, because I'm not writing. I'm just fairly free-versing it with this kind of thing. Where it was because the minimum count is 11 lines, so I would often just be like five lines per stanza, and plus and gives me a good thing, and I do 3 stanzas, gives me a beginning, middle, and end, which is important. A beginning, middle, and it gives me a structure to work with that is personally conductive to the flow of what I write in poems, but also it's not the only thing I've used. Sometimes I just do 1 stanza, sometimes I just do 2. It depends on how big I want to change throughout the poem is usually it. If I'm just exploring 2 emotions, like I brought up, I did one on magical girls. Obviously, I could go through that for playing on Google Docs, but we're not gonna do that right now. I don't want to do that one. It's because I had a stanza where it was my younger self enjoying it, and a stanza of my adult self enjoying it, and that's so that I only needed 2 stanzas due to what I was doing. Stanzas, by the way, are paragraphs. If you did not know, stanzas are paragraphs in full poems. It's just the words. I think that's fairly common knowledge going through school English classes, because I'm pretty sure all English classes point out what a stanza is. But that is what I use. 15 lines, 5 lines per stanza. And that tends to be my generic, this is what I'm writing on. I still use it when I need to write poems. Now, again, this is all just my workflow, my poetry flow is ideas, emotions, metaphor is generally by per stanza, per start of it. A metaphor / emotion is fairly just a good base for any poem, because I will point out more you actually feel the poem, better it comes out. It's just generally how I feel about it. I don't mess with structures. I'm really bad at meter and rhyming. If you don't want to write, yeah, no, just tips, and this is what I use. Now, then you write, which tends to be then writing the poem, which we will get into. Just in a bit, because writing poems have a lot of things to it. But I just want some general tips. I just want to write some general tips if people, because I know I'm usually a gaming channel. And I've talked about my love of poetry and writing before, but I've never gone into like this thing. General tips for poems is concrete detail, which means that's not how you spell detail. Can I not spell detail? There it is. Detail. A concrete detail. Be specific. Or specific. That's wrong, but yeah. Thank you. Autocorrect. Again, dyslexia. I rely on autocorrect quite a bit for writing. Concrete detail. Be specific. The biggest tip for this is you don't need to mention if the grass is green, sky is blue, or roses are red. But do if it's different from normal. This is an important tip. This is like one of the most important things I've. Because my only real general tip is concrete detail, be specific, because more specific imagery, better your poems. You want that image in the reader's mind is the greatest thing about poems. You want to create an image, but because you're not a prose writer, there is prose poetry. I'm not really gonna get into that side because I've never really written prose poetry. Concrete detail. You do not have the time of a novel. You don't have the time of a short story. You only have a small amount of time to get it through. Unless you're writing an epic, and that's cool. You can write epics. Epics are pretty neat, but most people, when they write poetry, are going to write epics. And even then, with epics, you do need concrete detail. Concrete detail is just a good writing advice, generally. You want to be specific. But for poetry, because of your limited words, you need to be specific. You need to be specifically on. You need to just point out what you're doing. So this is where the second tip, which I do remember, which I've carried on through my first lectures at uni to my current thing with poetry. You don't need to mention if the grass is green, sky is blue, roses are red, but you do need to mention if it's different from normal. AKA, you can shave off a lot of space if you don't waste time with what you can convince with what you think people know. So only bring up details if you don't think your audience will know it. Okay, you don't need to say the emerald green grass, you just say the grass. You don't need it, but if the grass is sapphire blue, mention they are sapphire blue. You don't need blue since sapphires are commonly known for being blue, the sapphire grass. That's the kind of thing for poetry. You need to just cut down on words. This tends to be because poetry isn't really. Well, you can ramble in poetry. Goblin Fruit's a very long poem. And it's a pretty old poem. It's from the Victorian age. But you can have very long poems. I personally can't write that long poem. My second general tip is don't be afraid to just stop writing. Just stop writing and try something new. This is a general tip for poems. Because poems are more of a punch than a full fight, which is a weird metaphor, but while poems are more of a punch of writing than a full fight that is writing a novel or script, you can't just stop writing. If a poem isn't working and you can't get your ideas out, just stop writing that poem and try something and try a new poem. This is really good specifically if you need to write a lot of poems in a short amount of time. Like I had to do at uni. You had to do a poem each week. So getting it down to realizing that you don't need to write something if it is not working is a good tip. Generally for writing, but it's definitely for poems. Poems are short enough that you aren't wasting a huge amount of time that you do it. I've had an idea for a poem for ages, which is just called Concrete Detail, which is just describing concrete. But I've never had a metaphor that's good for. So I've never had a. But I do have a tone I want to go for, which is a snarky thing of just how everyone says concrete detail. Because it's a fun thing. But I've never written that poem because I've never had a strong enough idea outside of, haha, this would be funny. So I've never done that. But it's one of the poems that I do want to try writing one day. So yes, that is. Don't be afraid to just start writing something there, because I have many poems that I never finished. I started but never finished. So we are just gonna get into writing the actual poem now, and this is where you'll see my process. I'm gonna go out full screen because I need this title, because we're gonna keep the same title because I like the title Skahak. Whoops, did not mean to do that. How did you get? Whoops. Yeah, the wrong thing. That's it. F11 for full screen. Skahak. We're going to up that to 15 because that's what we're writing in. 15. Okay, so another tip for poems is general tips. Lines don't start with capitals. This is a basic one. Lines don't start with capitals. Again, it's just a basic one. And you can change that in sayings. I just don't care enough to change it in sayings. I never have. It's easier just to write it. So we're going to put in Arial. from the original, and just write this one. So this is Skahak. Skahak is a trainer of heroes from Irish mythology. She's said to live off an island from Scotland in the Island of Shadows, or like the Shadowlands. She is a daughter of Morrigan, and she trained one of the most famous heroes, Cuchulainn, from and his brother. And I decided, since this is my first ever time actually just teaching an idea and going through like general tips and having ideas, why not about this? And I want to write about me, and because it's one of the first poems I wrote, I want to try and have X does not appear when I go to full screen and this stuff. And I want to try just having a small little kind of rebirth of that. I want to keep the main idea of feeling like you failed your students. That's the motion I want to go for. But also conflate that you did not help them enough. And it's not a motion I have felt. I've never really taught people. But feeling like you could have helped more in a situation is a feeling I feel like a lot of people have. So we're going to try and go for that emotion. And we're going to use that as a myth of when responsibility ends and you have to watch out. I'm going to be using some imagery from the Gawain in this, I've decided. And it's going to follow my standard 15 lines, 5 lines, 5 lines of stuff. So I'm gonna write my this poem here, so you can kind of get. This is my first time, so this poem imagery I want is of the Gawain. Is that how you spell it? Technically I did write it correctly, but I forgot the asterisk, so we're just gonna go here. Go, thank you. Thank you, Google Docs, for not changing it to what I needed to. Arial 15. Imagery of the Gabolg's aftermath, specifically. A feeling of sorrow. I want a feeling of sorrow. And that you could have helped more. And also a teacher's perspective. View. I can't write perspective right now. A teacher's view. Imagery of the Gabolg's aftermath. A feeling of sorrow that you could have helped more. And a teacher's view. Because Skahak was their teacher. Skahak is a very cool figure in Irish mythology. So, spelled for you wrong. Good go on me. So a Gabolg is a weapon from Irish mythology. It's specifically a bow. It's specifically described as being made of the bone of a sea monster, and you kick it with your foot, and it lodges into your target, and it basically turns them into like a rose bush of bloody thorns. And that's where we're going to start with that imagery, I have decided. Because I think it's a nice image. It's a very gruesome image, but it's a rose bush. That's not a bush, that's blush. A rose bush. How do you spell bush? Oh my god. God, that's not how you spell it. Because here's a tip for spelling. Let me put in spelling tip. Google is your friend. Google is your friend because spell check sucks. So just typing in what you need from Google. I'm going to be doing that on my phone so I don't keep going out of full screen mode. But I will be looking down as I do this. Rose. That's it. B-U-S-H. Cool. A rose bush with stems of blood. Gonna start out with our first line. Obviously, that might change over time. Writing a poem is very much just about writing, then editing it, then writing and editing it. But until you're happy with the end result. A rose bush with stems of blood. Where do I go from here is the thing. Because I had this as a start, so it's someone gazing upon the rose, the bloody thorns of it. I might change it to thorns of blood to get that across. With thorns of blood. A spear. Hang on. Okay, cool. We need. The first line is usually that. So a spear of bone. I'm thinking I want to take this. A rose bush with thorns of blood. A spear of bone. A trained kick. A trained kick. A technique. A technique I taught one, used on the other. Okay, so this is when we get into editing. So I do like, again, Google Docs are annoying. So this is where we get into editing, a big part of poetry. So I will talk through it because, hey, this is what I wanted the stream to be. Me talking through how you write a poem, my methods for writing a poem. So we got Skahak. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one to use. A technique I taught you one. Okay, I need to change that spelling. That's not working. A technique I taught one, used on the other. Technique I taught one, used on the other. Okay, used needs to go down here, because this is a bad line. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick. A technique I taught one, used on the other. So this is getting into the myth of it. So the issue is I often have 5. So yeah, that's one of the things. Editing, you just usually drop stuff with line on. This is a common. This is a common both a flaw and something which just happens with poetry is your line length descending or increasing. Usually you want to keep them around the same is usually the goal unless you're doing something. But it's fine. This is fine. I don't view this one as incredibly bad. I like the descent on this one. It works, but because poems are also visual. Poems are visual in a way that prose writing is not, because of the line length. You can mess around with line length, you can ignore the line length, but because of the visuals of the line length, that affects a lot of things. These lines are continuous, but the line break acts as a comma or in a full stop in both ways. How to make it act like a comma is you don't add a capital on the next line. How you act it as a full stop is you add a capital on the next line. This is technically one long sentence, but it does not function as such because of it being a poem. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other. Yeah, there's just a little pause, which means you can do that. This is why I used on the other, dropped used down to here, because it's more of a twist from this. Now, this is one thing with poems, and generally how I came up with this structure, which I don't know if it's already been used, probably it's a very simple structure, is accidental ideas while you write. Use these. These will appear constantly. Example is this. A, then in the last line, switching. Now, I want this to be 5 lines, so I'm going to have to add in a line somewhere that begins with A. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other. Now, I don't really know what line I want to add, because I think that's a fine stanza right now, and I don't want to really disrupt the flow of this current one, which is, I think, pretty good. I could just leave as this. It's fine to leave it like this. I wanted to use this, but it's fine. You don't always need to keep to your structure that you say you keep to. This isn't a haiku, where haikus are very definite of stay in this structure, do this structure. This is fairly freeform. I just said, hey, this is a structure I tend to use. I'm probably gonna break it, and that's fine. It's fine to do stuff like that. Obviously, I want to still keep that to this. So, A rose bush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick. A technique I taught one, used on the other. And then we're going on to a new stanza. Now, I could keep A, switch to the last line. We could try that. We could keep going with that. So, we'll try that. Though it does lead to an issue of all of these being lists. Now, that isn't inherently bad, as long as it comes out like it's intended instead of laziness. It really comes down to, does it work in the grand scheme? Because, hey, a list can be powerful. Lists are a powerful tool. I've used them. I've used a list potentially before of a interesting idea that I had, but I had stuff to break up the list throughout the poem. That was a 6-stanza poem with a list being every other stanza, and then a more traditional poem between that, and that was fun. But no, we're gonna get into. We're gonna probably try that. So we got a Island of Shadow. Let me see if it's actually called the Island of Shadow, because if it has something else, I can like buff the line out a bit. And that's, I do kind of want to do that. So I do remember it having something else to it. So let's see. Let's see, Wikipedia. Ah, yes. I know. Okay, cool. I know why it's often... Yes. Okay, cool. A island... Okay, so we're going to change it to an island of sky and shadow, as it's technically called the Island of Sky. But she lives in a fortress called Fortress. That explains why it's often called the Land of Shadow, because, it's... The people talk. You don't need to be completely accurate to myths if it works for the poem. Again. So, we're starting at a capital because this is a new thing. An island of sky and shadow. So a boy of light. I can't go with a boy of light and fight. But that sounds really bad. So a boy, because I want to. God damn it! Just go. Because I want to describe Cucullin and his bow brother Ferdinand. So Cucullin's main traits is he's a guard dog. He is a son of Luke and possibly Luke himself. And he is famous for his fighting nature. So a boy of light implies a child of Luke, but that's fairly mythological, and I don't know how many people would get that one. A boy named after a boy who is a guard dog is probably a better. It's probably a better one for that. The Island of Sky and Shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, and then going with another one, which I need to look up into what Ferdinand's mainly is known for, because Ferdinand is a mythical figure I don't know that much about, sadly. So always make sure to make liberal use of Wikipedia. Again, it's one of those things where you just have to make use of the tools that you have. Childhood. Ferdinand. Okay, Ferdinand. Oh damn, I didn't realize. Sorry, I'm just reading through it. I didn't realize Ferdinand got his own cool weapon from Scarhawk. That's pretty neat. Sorry, I'm just reading through this to see if I can get anything for it. Cool. Featherland seems to exist just in context of another boy. Just in context to match Ku and die tragically, but we could use that. We could use that. I'm sorry for the silence of me reading. Again, we might switch over to stream. By the way, since we're burning through this poem, we might do something else after. Really depends on the time. If we got to like an hour and a half, I'm like, okay, cool. We'll just leave it at this. But I will end the stream if we do something else and do. Okay, so since it seems like he was given a cool shield by Skahag, we can use that. And we can also mirror it with a guard dog. You may notice, wait a minute, I went against using all A's here. Another makes a sound of an A, and I don't care that much. It fits with the weird structure up here, but it also changes it so it's not completely repetitive. So we got a rose bush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other, a island of sky and shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, and another boy. I want to use guard or shield. So I'm thinking to match the guard. To match the guard dog. A boy. Practice with a shield or may. Guarded by a shield we'll go with. And this is when we break the line length of going into this length, which is fine. Again, I'm not a big person on doing like stuff. If this looks visually nice, this one looks a bit bad. We'll probably get a mess with that in the editing. So we got a rose bush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other, a island of sky and shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, another guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and conquer. I want to change taught how to kill and to. I want like something more because like Skahag trained heroes on, but to be heroes is a bit clunky. Hero isn't really a verb. Taught how to kill and to valor. Taught to kill and of valor. We'll go with that. Wait, is that? Change to British English. I'm writing a poem in Irish. I might as well be into British. Also, apparently I spelled Mia wrong. Okay, cool, whatever. So far this poem's showing up pretty okay. This is not my best work, but I think it's 1,000 times better than the previous Scar poem I had. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other, a island of shadow, sky and shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, another with guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and of valor. Oh wait, we're going on to a wow. Okay, cool. We're on another page. I might move this all down to another page if I can. Let me page break here, so it's all on one page. How do you page break in thing? Because I know how to do it in Okay, cool. We're just gonna do this. Perfectly fine normal behavior that was. So, Skahak, a rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on love, a sky of shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, another who is guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and of valor. We're gonna start with a war of kingdoms and of magic. A war of kingdoms and of magic. War of kingdoms and we need to evolve that of magic. A war where gods... where technically it was God because Luke showed up to heal Kukulin, but I want to get gods because that's also in the wrong way, where gods healed their champion. Healed their champions. Healed their champion. A war where brother killed brother. Where Balbra killed Balbra. Whoops. Too many battles there. Brother killed each other. The Bow brothers killed each other. Obviously, we need to change this quickly. And we're getting back to repetitiveness with a war, a war, a war. A war of kingdom and magic, where a god to heal a champion, a god to heal a hero, a place where Bow brother. No, that is too short of a line. The issue here is this is too short of a line, but I do like where it's going. A war of kingdoms and of magic. A god here to heal a hero, A place, a battle of brothers. Yes, a battle of brothers. Okay, we can go there. We can go with that. A battle of brothers. But these lines are too short compared to other ones. A god to heal a hero at cost of death. I'm honestly thinking what I can do here that makes it somewhat better. Because this last stanza needs to be impactful. We need to tie it back to this first one. Talking about... We already talked about the battle between the two here. We talked about them here and a kingdom of war. A war of kingdoms and of magic. We can skip... I think we can get rid of the god. We don't need a reference to Luke, honestly. A battle of brothers... A battle of brothers, a spear and a shield. A spear and a shield. Yes. That's we're gonna put a full stop here because usually we've been using these as full stops, but since this is a middle of line, we're gonna use it as that. So we're gonna break up the line a bit. So we got also let me just put another general tip in here. Say your poems to yourself multiple times because that will help you understand if you're going in the right direction. Trust me, it's the reason I've read it out so many times through doing this. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one used on the other, an island of sky and shadow, a boy who was a guard dog, another guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and of valor, a war between kingdoms and of magic, a battle of a war between kingdoms fought with curses. Because this does happen in the myth. It's mainly just to set... This line's just to set up a war, which goes into a battle of brothers. But we're just setting up the war and a curse, which is more a reference to the thing. I think a curse is not needed, but I do think it's needed to pad out the line a little bit. That's why we're gonna go with that. Curses. A battle of brothers, a spear and a shield, which gives away a war of kingdoms. A war of kingdoms full of curses. A battle of brothers, a spear and a shield. A technique I taught one. We're gonna go with this because this is actually a pretty good line. A technique I taught one. And this is the last line, which I want to use again. The turn. A technique I taught one. and I wanted to reference the Fortress of Shadows, and I wanted to reference being alone and mourning. And I don't want us to say mourning in the Fortress of Shadows. That's kind of... I tore one. Mourning in the Fortress of Shadows. Now, what I'm thinking of doing, though, would break a line. A candle is lit in the Fortress of Shadows, referencing death. Or like a lighting of a candle for someone who's died. But it does keep the AAA for the full thing, which I don't really know what the AA one's meant to represent. It's been a thing. We could change it into a Fortress of Shadows, a candle is lit. Or something like that, which I think is probably a little stronger. I tore one. In the Fortress of Shadows, a candle is lit. Plus, it contrasts the shadows bit in the same line. Now, again, we've almost done this in under an hour. I'm gonna go through it to see if I'm happy with it. I might not be. That last line I'm kind of iffy on, but again, I just wanted to do like a small, like, little poetry stream. So, a rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other, a island of sky and shadow, a boy who is a guard dog, another guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and of valor, a war of kingdoms fought with curses, a battle of brothers, a spear and a shield, a technique I taught one. In the Fortress of Shadows, a candle is lit. I think I'm still a bit iffy. I want like another morning thing, other than like crying or just using morning. In Fortress of Shadows, a candle is lit. I think it's the strongest one I've got, because it's using... Because originally, I will say, when I had the god line in here, I wanted to have Skahak reference that she's a child of a god, and reference the thing. But I didn't really think that was needed, really. I think it wasn't... I don't think it was needed, basically. So we're going to go with a child of... we're going to go with a candle is lit, because right now that's the strongest line I can really think of. Of course, going back to poems with fresh eyes will probably make me think, what was I thinking, what was I doing here? But this is probably what I'm going to go for right now. I do think I'm going to add one more thing here. A technique that I was taught fairly early on with my poems, because I did a lot of writing about a trainer, the warrior who trained the heroes, Cuchulainn and Ferdinand, which I need to get up on my phone so I can spell them correctly. Which Ferdinand this technique is often useful if you're like me and you talk about obscure myths a lot and use them as a reference point in your thing. It's a way to basically ensure the audience knows about what you're talking about, with a small description below the title. And if they want to know more, they can Google it. That's an important thing. Trust your audience that they know how to use Google and Googling something they find interesting. So we're going to go with this as the poem. Skahak, a warrior who trained the heroes of Cuchulainn and Ferdinand. A rosebush with thorns of blood, a spear of bone, a trained kick, a technique I taught one, used on the other. A island of sky and shadow, a dog, a boy who is a guard dog, another who is guarded by a shield, taught how to kill and of valor. A war of kingdoms, fought with curses, a battle of brothers, spear and a shield, a technique I taught one. In the Fortress of Shadows, a candle is lit. I think this is an okay poem. I don't think it's one of my best, but I did just write it, and it's important to show that, like, while you're working, not all of your art is going to be the greatest or the most best. I think this is an okay poem. I think some things is a bit hackneyed, because whatever. That made me laugh for some reason. But I think it's an okay poem, and it's to show how I write poetry. And I really hope if anyone's watches, I know this isn't the usual content I do, that if you enjoyed this, please give poetry a chance. It's a fun medium. Just, just one for it. Keep these in mind. Again, these are like just general tips I know. But just write poetry. It's a fun time. This is one I wrote. Now, since that only took up an hour, we are going to probably transition to Pathfinder Kingmaker for like the last 2 hours. But I will stop the stream, go get a glass of water to do that with, since my throat. I have been talking non-stop for an hour about poetry. I wrote this. So when I come back, we'll get that set up, and I'll go do that next, and we'll get that back. Thank you everyone for coming to the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit different, a bit experimental, going on about like my liking of poetry. Very different from my usual work. Until I'll be back in a bit, and I'll see you guys probably at 1 o'clock. See you guys at 1 o'clock. I'll be back in a bit. See you then.